welcome back to Block TV. Breaking developments overnight in the ongoing saga that is the Telegram Open Network launch. The launch date of the end of October, guaranteed with investors, October 31st, is officially postponed. Several hours ago, on the overnight between Wednesday and Thursday, Telegram sent a letter to investors informing them that they no longer intend to go ahead with their contractually obligated launch date at the end of this month. That was in response, of course, to the SEC's restraining order prohibiting the company from launching TON and issuing Gram tokens. To tell us more about all these dramatic developments, I'm joined in studio by senior correspondent Asha Westrup-Evans. Okay, Asha, first of all, this letter sent overnight, several hours ago, what does it state?
And so in an email sent out to investors, effectively Telegram has said that they're not going to go ahead. Now, rather quote directly from the email itself, in which they stated, "We had intended to launch the TON network in late October. However, the recent SEC lawsuit has made that timing unachievable. We disagree with the SEC's legal position and intend to vigorously defend the lawsuit. We're proposing to extend the deadline date in order to provide additional time to resolve the SEC's lawsuit and work with other governmental authorities in advance of the launch of the TON network."
And you know what, before we even jump into how we got here, it's a very interesting, and I'm wondering, there are mentality differences between the managers of Telegram, TON, Pavel Durov, I'm claiming that they're Russian, as opposed to, what this entails, and this is an American, cease and desist order. I'm wondering if that language, and stick with me on this one, we are proposing, they are not doing this, they're proposing to launch to postpone the launch.
Well, it has to be a proposal, because at this stage they're under some contractual obligations that mean that they're not going to be able to just go ahead and do that themselves. Contractually, they are obliged to launch the Telegram Open Network by October 31st, or have to pay a refund to those initial investors to the tune of around 77%
which they said
of
they would.
their initial investment, which they'll have to. They don't really have a choice in the matter. That's 77% of 1.7 billion, let's remember here. So we're not talking a small refund, and they have already sunk a lot of money and time and energy into trying to get this network off the ground throughout the last 2 years. What makes this even more difficult, Yael, is that it's not simply one set of investors they have to deal with. As we'll remember from earlier reporting, there are two sets of investors. There were two rounds. One who bought at around 37 cents, and another set of investors who bought at around $1.33, totaling about 171 high net wealth or institutions that invested in the Telegram Open Network at that early preliminary stage. Now, what that means is each group now has to go ahead and vote and decide by majority, shareholder majority, whether or not they're willing to extend this deadline to April 30, which is what Telegram wants, or they get that 77% refund. So each group has to decide. What could be a really damaging scenario for Telegram is if one group decides, okay, we'll go ahead, and the other group says, we won't. In that condition, and they dealt with this, I quote, they say, "In these circumstances, we propose to make certain limited amendments to the terms of the purchase agreements that remain in place to reflect that fact that fewer grams will be issued in circulation on the network launch date." What that means, to move away from the sort of babble language, the legal babble language there, is they'll have a bunch less liquidity, they'll have had to refund a large amount of the network, and yet they still will want to go ahead with a potential massive tokens still being held by the company, a complete lack of liquidity in the market, and one group of investors that could end up with a lot less money at launch date than they were hoping they were going to be able to get.
It sounds like they're replanning their route. Off the record sources who are familiar with the Telegram network told us earlier this morning that it is the mentality of a bunker right now within Telegram, that they're trying to rejigger, given the fact that the SEC cease and desist actually took them by surprise. That's according to one source. But how did we get here? Let's talk about this SEC.
Let's break down the timeline here. So on Friday the 11th of October, we had the SEC file the lawsuit and get their temporary injunction to halt the going ahead of the Telegram Open Network. We can see in that letter there that was filed by the SEC, that lawsuit claiming that it had been an unregulated securities sale that had been done by Telegram, and that you can't just call it cryptocurrency and get away with an unregulated securities exchange. They said that these are securities. They went ahead and sold to US investors, approximately, according to the lawsuit, to the tune of $425 million to US investors, and now they have to face the consequences. That is led to further investigations, according to BLOCKTV's own reporting, according to sources inside Telegram. FinCEN, the biting arm of the US Treasury Department with their criminal enforcement network, has gone out and is continuing to investigate Telegram themselves, risking to block Telegram's finances in Europe. That's according to sources who spoke to BLOCKTV directly.
And not only that, I mean, we have reached out to Finson. Finson is yet to respond. Needless to say, that's a regular thing.
Exactly. So not known for their rapid responses.
But that is as of earlier this week. This was a bit of information.
Exactly. So now where we stand, we've got this plan now from Telegram that they want to delay, and we're going to have to wait to decide what investors choose to go ahead with. That will all culminate in a court hearing on October the 24th. Interestingly, one day after Mark Zuckerberg is scheduled to speak at Congress about the Libra project. So we'll see how the US deals with it.
And I'm looking at those dates. So next week, essentially, Washington is dealing with trying to put the kibosh, so to speak, if not regulate, but trying to put the kibosh on Libra with a very high-profile Senate, a very high-profile hearing with Mark Zuckerberg. A day after that, the SEC is taking Ton to court.
Exactly. So it seems that there's going to be some pretty harsh crackdown across the spectrum of the US government on these sort of large-scale social media coins and social media developments. And it puts
Almost
serious...
seems like a concerted effort.
Perhaps so. Maybe the timing is just playing out these beautiful coincidences. But regardless, they are definitely cracking down. They're taking a serious stance against Telegram and saying to them, you cannot just go ahead with this, certainly not in the US. And of course, when you're blocked in the US, you could potentially be blocked in much of the rest of the world.
Now, to finalize this, this poses so many problems for Telegram, for Pavel Durov, and for Ton. Makes one wonder, but investors who put their faith into Ton actually already rolled with it. So this is not just problematic from the SEC side, right?
Yeah, look, when you're talking about a project value, that raised over $1.7 billion in initial capital, there is a lot of interest here already at play, particularly when that money's been effectively sitting stationary as far as investors are concerned for the last 2 years. So investors had already gone ahead, going against their contractual limitations, and had been reselling in some senses.
And being upfront about it, which is bizarre.
Exactly. Reselling in a lot of ways on secondary markets. And obviously, the Graham tokens didn't actually exist, so they weren't actually selling anything. They were selling what's termed ostensibly a futures product,
That can describe half of the sphere.
Exactly. Well, certainly. But in this case particularly, the Telegram Open Network did not exist. They were selling tokens they didn't have, but they were promised to have, and saying they would sell a certain percentage on. This has caused a large secondary market. We saw on Liquid, we saw Black Moon, we saw Crypterium all selling. And we actually spoke to Austin Kim from Crypterium about that secondary market and the strength of it. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
No, of course, what we have done is we've talked to a number of providers of the token. So there were about 170 institutional high net worth buyers. They bought them with the expectation that they would be able to release them when the Ton network goes live. The initial estimates of the Ton network going live was early in the year. So there's a lot of institutional buyers out there have been holding the tokens a little bit longer than they expected. So there's a small supply that people are prepared to effectively sell at a pre-agreed price, either through an exchange with a pre-agreed agreement or directly. So we're not taking any company risk. We have a limited supply. It's not unlimited, of course, with a agreed price structure.
Not taking any company risk, I think they just did.
Yeah, well, maybe the investors are at risk, maybe the company's at risk. The point is they were all selling a product that didn't exist and now looks like won't exist till at least April 30th or potentially ever, depending on how all this regulatory rigmarole plays out. But this is a real problem for a lot of people who've already made these investments, a lot of exchanges who've committed to fulfilling these obligations. This is layers upon layers of obligations, agreements, contracts. They're all reliant on this network launching by the end of October. Now it looks like that's not going to happen, Yael. I don't want to use the word shit show, but potentially we could end up in that.
And that is the fear. As we said, also sources within Telegram, some sources within Telegram are saying that the company is in bunker war mode, that they didn't expect this from the SEC, that they were in talks with the SEC, and this came as a surprise. Once again, one source not confirmed. But as you said, this could end up as a shit show. Either way, the headline is quite damning. Ton extends or postpones their launch date, their very, very hard launch date of October 31st till April 2020. We will keep following this story on BLOCKTV. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter